We all recognize and understand that the business imperative behind diversity and inclusion. Let's discuss the kind of benefits you're witnessing. What's the impact on performance and on culture of your firms? Rod, why don't you kick it off?
So we began Voya's journey as a public company 5 years ago. In fact, just last week, we celebrated our 5th anniversary. We were formerly part of ING Group, so a global bank, a global insurance company. When we went public, we had the ambition to get to parity on our board as fast as we can. I'm happy to tell you that 5 years in, 50% of my independent directors are women. Of my executive committee, 7 of the 10 are women or minorities. And of our business leaders, profit center leaders, 50% are women. That didn't happen by accident, and I don't think it's an absolutely linear point, but the results we've enjoyed during this period of time, I think, have been a direct attribution to that focus and that priority. And it was not just my focus, it was our board's focus. Our market cap has gone up by 70%. Our stock is up 170%. The S&P is up 70%. And I think if you connect those dots, there's some attribution that is worthy of drawing out in the course of the conversation.
Excellent. Julie, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Rod and I had a chance to talk about his story and the Voya story before, and I think very critical to that story is Rod's leadership and the board's leadership. And so we see that as being a very important part of achieving success. And I was incredibly impressed because Rod faced what we also face at Accenture, which is you have a legacy business. You know, we're not born digital. We're not starting over, although in your case the board was. And it is difficult to make those transitions quickly. So I was very impressed with that. We see diversity is really critical to being an innovation-led company. And we were not always an innovation-led company. I joined Accenture 8 years ago, and we used to say very proudly we were fast followers. And around 5 years ago, we set on a strategy to become really a digital company. We were less than 20% digital, cloud, and security. Today, we're over 55%. And the same year that we set the goal to completely transform our company, we doubled down on diversity. We are 435,000 people worldwide, leading in digital, cloud, and security, and 41% women. And that came from a deliberate strategy, but we saw them, again, that correlation between results and that focus on diversity, we think, is critical. In North America, it's about 50% of our business. I, too, have a 50-50 leadership team. And we've, over the last 3 years, had an 8% annual compound growth rate. And so, again, it's not linear, but we really, truly believe to be an innovation-led company and to perform in a world where there's so much disruption. You know, you have to have a diverse leadership team and a diverse employee base.
Susan, your thoughts?
Well, first, thank you, Peter and Bloomberg, for having us here and really shining a bright light on the important topic of gender equality and diversity and inclusion. AMN Healthcare is very proud to be a part of this group. You know, I have a slightly different story in that AMN Healthcare today is the largest and leading provider of healthcare workforce solutions and healthcare staffing. But that's been a building over time. And when I started almost 30 years ago, it was just a little mom and pop shop. And now we're really leading the way in transforming the way healthcare organizations manage, recruit, retain, and optimize their workforce. And there's many things I'm proud of. Certainly our financial performance. We've typically been beating the market and certainly at the top end of our peers. But what I'm probably most proud of is the culture that we've built at AMN. And I have to say, we've really built a transparent and inclusive culture in a probably more organic way over the years. Today, over 60% of our workforce is female. Over 60% of our supervisors and managers are female. And about 45% of our directors on up are female within the organization. And yet we still believe we have a ways to go. And that is especially true when it comes to the broader topic of diversity. We need to continue to transform transform our workforce and the way we look at our workforce so that we are matching our stakeholders, certainly our clients, our clinicians, our communities in which we serve. And so that's something that you are constantly evolving and examining.
So you all are great exemplars of what can be done with the right kind of leadership. And you've given us kind of a broad picture of each of your firms and the successes, which many of the people in the audience, I'm sure, envy them the way I do. What's worked? What are kind of one or two things that you've found have really changed the game as you've implemented some of these plans and kind of led the team? Rod?
I think it's truly been, in our case, a test and learn piece. We're not a perfect company, and I'm not sure those companies do exist. But you mentioned focused on culture, and I think that's a really, really critical part. I mean, we had a chance to reinvent a company with a fresh piece of paper. I've referred to it often as a 6,000-person startup company. And I had great support from our board in the ambition of that outcome. But it isn't a check-the-box activity that, you say this is important, the CEO or the senior people delegate it, mission accomplished. It just doesn't work that way. And you're going to try a lot of things that just aren't going to work. And I think you have to pivot and learn from that. And over time, those accomplishments will be recognized. I mean, the Bloomberg recognition is important. In our case, coming out of the financial crisis, it was very important. Our ambition is to be America's retirement company. We came out of the financial crisis. One of the things we pursued was, there's an organization called Ethisphere, the Ethisphere Institute. And they recognize the world's most ethical companies. There's 132 globally. We've been fortunate enough for 5 years in a row to be recognized as one of the world's most ethical companies. This was the first year we were eligible for the Fortune's Most Admired. There were only 2 companies that were recognized by Fortune, by Ethisphere, and by Bloomberg for the Gender Equality Index. We were one of the 2. Those are outcomes of the test and learn activities that we've been doing along the way. So everything we've tried hasn't worked, but people recognize it's okay, let's go try some things and come back and keep pivoting. We've been successful. Julie and I were talking about this earlier, at the board level and at my direct report level, pushing this now in the organization that is really becomes part of the DNA is the next level of good for us.
Julie, thoughts on kind of what has really worked?
Well, I go back to something you said earlier in the lead-in, and that was about trust. So at the very beginning, we set out with a view that transparency creates trust. And that's really important for both keeping your employees with you and retaining, and also attracting diverse talent, particularly if you're not starting from a great place. And so our board and our global CEO, I think we're very early adopters of the idea of being transparent. We set a goal to hire 40% of our about 100,000 people we hire globally, and we made that goal public and held ourselves accountable. We've now set a transparent goal to globally be at 50-50 by 2025, and they've supported me in setting a goal in the US to be at 40% by 2020, and we became the first professional services company in the US to actually be completely transparent about our numbers across women, ethnicity, veterans, and persons with disabilities. And as I said when I started, it wasn't because our numbers were great. Like, we didn't wait. We did it because we needed a disruption, and we needed to create that trust that while our numbers were not yet great, we really cared. And we think it's been a real change maker for us, because it, first of all, when we're asking people to care about creating a diverse colleagues and a more inclusive culture, if you don't trust people to share where you are and why it matters and link it to your business, you can't do that and say, but I'm not going to tell you where we are. And so that was important, not only for recruiting and keeping great diverse talent, but for galvanizing the company around, this is critical for our innovation strategy, for our future. And this is where we are, and we need everyone to help. And we believe that's really important, and you shouldn't wait until your numbers are perfect, right? Because you won't ever get to those numbers we believe, unless you're willing to be transparent.
Susan?
I'll give you some very specific examples ranging from the board level down to things that I do on an everyday basis. So, starting in that sort of building the everyday culture, we do things like AMN Live, which is once a month I do an open town hall where leaders will take any question from any team member. And that just, in and of itself, sets the tone that we want to hear from you. We want to understand everybody's ideas and opinions. But also, anytime I go visit one of our offices, I have a Connect with Susan meeting where I invite anybody who wants to come have lunch with me and talk about what we could be doing better. But you can't expect people to always speak up and raise their hands. Sometimes that's difficult in a large room. And so also just walking out into your offices and asking people very specifically, what can we do better to increase our diversity and inclusion? It's not all going to come from your talent team or your leadership team. Many of your team members probably have fantastic ideas, but if you're not out there showing that you actually want their opinions and asking for them, they may be hesitant to share. The second example is really know your numbers, and that doesn't mean just get excited about the top line numbers, some of those that I even just rattled off, which appear very positive. Dig in and understand where you may have gaps, because you could have really positive top line numbers in diversity, but you could dig into specific divisions and departments and see that things are actually fairly unbalanced. And I've seen that in our own organization. We actually put a filter on almost anything we can around diversity, because we want to understand, as we're giving merit increases, is there any sort of unintended imbalance between any sort of gender imbalance or other forms of diversity. Engagement surveys as we're promoting individuals. Usually these things are unintended, but if you sort of step back and look at them, you might realize that there actually aren't as many opportunities for women within your organization. And why is that? And so if you don't measure it, you don't know what you're looking at, and we don't have particular quotas in place, but just by looking at the numbers and digging in a little bit deeper and asking the questions, you always find opportunity. And then just finally, talent reviews is something that we do throughout the organization at all levels. We talk about our talent and up and coming superstars that are going to go to the next level, and you always want to put a lens of diversity on that as well, and be asking sometimes the somewhat obvious question of, why don't you have more diversity on your team and people that are ready to step up? And if we need to dig deeper in the organization and, very importantly, at the front end, recruit individuals that represent a greater diversity, then what are we doing to make that happen with a slate of candidates and as well as our development programs? And then we share those with the board of directors. And I'm very fortunate. We have a very engaged board that is asking us about culture and asking us about diversity. And so you shouldn't be shy to share your numbers with them as well.
So we're great believers in if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And one of the motivations behind the Gender Equality Index was to very much do that and kind of lay it out, focusing, as it was pointed out before, on transparency, which is kind of the foundation that we build our firm on. Why have each of you chosen to be part of the Gender Equality Index, and how was that decision made?
For us, it was, again, just in the pursuit of both being transparent and having the ability to see how other industries, I mean, our numbers are our numbers. You're trying to improve things. So you've got to start somewhere. And we know we have real room for improvement. And so being able to both participate and learn from the trends that we're learning from the involvement with Bloomberg is very useful.
Yeah, and I would say I completely agree. I think benchmarking, sometimes you can kind of drink your own Kool-Aid,
yes,
so
exactly.
making sure you understand it. But also, we see this, we believe our diverse workforce is a competitive differentiator. We believe we are getting better top talent because of our commitment to diversity. And so we want to be a part of the index because it is part of our story about who we are and our accomplishments. And I will tell you, I am always grateful to the media when they write stories about the things companies are doing, because our people look and they compare. And we know that when we're talking about these things and making accomplishments, that there is great talent out there saying, I want to go to Accenture over some of our competitors because if we were. So we see it as an important part of our story to people about why join Accenture.
Susan?
I certainly agree there's a great business reason to be focused on diversity and to be constantly learning and evolving. I actually think it's a necessity if you want to continue to transform and evolve as an organization. But I also think it's a responsibility that we have, quite honestly, a social responsibility we have to continue to make sure that we are doing our part to shine a light on this important topic and to encourage all young people who think about what they want to do with their life, whether it be, Caucasian, ethnicity, gender, whatever that individual brings to the table, that they see that we are welcoming and with open arms. And in fact, we believe that we will be not only better companies, but better industries and a better country if we have better gender inclusion.
Rod?
Just one idea that we that we did just last week, and again, this is in recognition of the focus in the last period here, the last month of diversity and inclusion. One of the pieces of feedback we had from a number of our employees was the board seemed very distant. We don't know who they are. How can we be more familiar with them? We did a podcast last Friday with the head of my nominating and governance committee is a woman. Her name is Lynn Bigger. Lynn is the Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Communication Officer for Visa. And she and I did a podcast with the head of diversity and inclusion for Voya to our employee resource groups, completely unscripted. So all of the resource groups with the various challenges that they're facing could ask any question they wanted of us for an hour. And it's the first time we've done it, and it was terrific. Lynn was great, but it was the interchange of Lynn and I, and frankly, the various employee resource groups and Lynn or myself was just another kind of the test and learn piece that we found quite useful.
So, Julie, go ahead.
One thing I wanted to pick up, because both of you have talked about this idea of inclusion, like you just talked about all your employee resource groups, you talked about it. And one of the things that I think many of us, as we're kind of going along this journey, are really focused on is this idea of inclusiveness, which is really, it's for Caucasian, it's for all employees. And I think sometimes in our drive that's very important to get our numbers and to create the diverse employee base, we don't always focus on how important it is to have an inclusive culture for everyone. And I would encourage you, if you go to YouTube, you can go to #InclusionStartsWithI. We have done a video that's for use. It's being used for many, many companies, including ourselves. You will cry, I will tell you when you read it, when you watch it. But it focuses on everyone at our company and tells their story of what it's like to feel not included in what we do. And so as sort of, we kind of think that's the next evolution of focus is on this inclusiveness.
I'm curious as to what you're hearing from your shareholders about their view of diversity and inclusion and how they think about that when they make their investment decisions.
So we're in the asset management and retirement business. Our aspiration is to be recognized over time as America's retirement company. So you might imagine this is a very important topic to us. And with increasing frequency, although it's in the early stages, various companies and frankly governmental groups are saying, I will only do business with and then fill in the blank. And we very much, among all the other very good reasons to be on the leading edge of this, that's a very good practical business reason to be there. And I think the momentum of this is going to dramatically accelerate over a period of time. Certainly, we want to be on the front end of that discussion.
Susan?
I am thrilled to see that investors are now paying much more attention to a company's culture and what we're doing from a social standpoint, and really using our resources to affect change where it matters. There are funds such as Hermes, who's initiated an SGR fund that AMN is a part of. And so we're actually having conversations with large investors about what we've done to build the culture that we have and the best practices, but what more we can do together. Now, they certainly want results and performance as well, but AMN Healthcare has proven that we can both have great performance, but also focus on things like diversity and inclusion and using our resources to affect our communities locally and globally. And so we're having those conversations much more frequently than when we went public in 2001. Trust me, for the first decade or so, it was just all about the numbers, but that's changing.
Yeah. Julie?
So our Investor and Analyst Day was just a couple of weeks ago, and for the first time, and I think this says it all, we had our Chief Leadership and Human Resources Officer on stage talking about our talent strategy, including how we build culture, skill people, and diversity. And I think that really says where investors and analysts are today.
This has been terrific. Thank you, the three of you, for sharing your thoughts and successes and sharing a little bit about the fact that this is a journey without a finish line. We appreciate it. I want to say to my colleagues, I have 1 minute and 37 seconds to go, so I'm leaving others with a little bit of positive surplus, but thank you all, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.